I was halfway down the hallway when I heard it. Not a whisper, not a slip of the tongue, but clear enough to slice through the air like broken glass. That old cow just won't die. My daughter's voice. My Kiana. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I froze, my hand still on the chipped door frame, the sound of the refrigerator humming behind me. But then she laughed, a short, bitter little sound I didn't recognize, and her friend's voice chimed in, "Girl, just kick her out already." I didn't move. I couldn't. My own child was talking about me like I was a stray animal blocking her driveway. "I tried," Kiana went on, her voice now low but sharp enough to carry, "but she's stubborn, won't sign the place over, thinks she's gonna live forever. I swear, maybe I should get some kind of paper saying she's losing it upstairs, then I could take over legally." Her friend laughed. That was the moment something inside me snapped. No, it didn't snap. It went quiet. Ice cold quiet, the kind of stillness you feel right before a hurricane breaks your windows. I pushed the door open and stepped into the kitchen. They both looked up. Kiana's eyes went wide for half a second, then narrowed like nothing was wrong. "What's up, Ma?" she asked casually, as if I hadn't just heard my own child planning my removal from my own home. "Pack your things," I said. Her mouth fell open. "What?" "You've got 1 hour," I told her. My voice didn't shake. I didn't raise it. I didn't have to. She laughed like I was joking. Then she saw I wasn't. It's funny how fast your mind can travel when your heart is breaking. In those minutes between hearing the words and saying mine, I'd traveled years back. Back to holding her as a baby on those sleepless nights. Back to walking 2 miles in the Georgia heat to get diapers on sale. Back to the smell of baby powder in our tiny 1-bedroom apartment when I was 24 and scared out of my mind, but still sure I'd figure it out. Kiana was my only child, my miracle. The one I promised myself I would protect from every ugly thing I'd ever seen growing up in the South Side. I didn't care if I had to work double shifts at the diner and mop floors at the community center at night. She was gonna have more than I ever did, and she did. Too much, maybe. She had the best shoes when other kids wore hand-me-downs. She had a brand new iPhone when I still had a flip phone with a cracked screen. I went without so she could fit in. Every school trip, every summer camp, and if it meant taking a side gig cleaning offices at night, I did it. I told myself that's what good mothers do. The first time she ever threw my sacrifices back at me, she was 16. I'd just gotten home from a 12-hour day and she was upset I wouldn't give her gas money to go to a party across town. "You just don't want me to have a life," she snapped. "I'm tired, baby, and money's tight right now." "Yeah, well, maybe if you had a real job instead of smelling like fried food all the time." That one hurt, but I told myself she was just a teenager. They say dumb things. When she turned 18, she told me she was dropping out of her nursing program because she'd met someone online. His name was Jarrell. He had businesses. She said he was rich. "You don't need college if you marry right, Ma," she told me, like she discovered a shortcut in life. I begged her to be careful. She called me bitter. Said I didn't want her to be happy. She left a month later. When she came back a year after that, she was pregnant. And she had a black eye. Jarrell had kicked her out. I didn't ask too many questions. I just opened the door. Because that's what mothers do, right? She was sweet at first, quiet, grateful, but slowly the demands started. "Ma, can you run to the store? I'm craving mangoes." We don't even have a store in our neighborhood that sells mangoes. I took 2 buses into Midtown to get them. When I came back, she took 1 bite and said, "Ugh, these are overripe, throw them out." Then it was, "Ma, you smell like grease again. Ma, you should quit that job. Ma, just live off your Social Security. You will be fine. And then the big one. Ma, you should sign the house over to me. You're not gonna live forever. That's when the first crack appeared. But hearing her tonight, hearing her call me that and joke about getting me declared incompetent, that wasn't a crack. That was the whole damn wall coming down. The thing about giving someone an hour to leave is, it sounds short, but in your mind, it lasts a lifetime. Every tick of the clock feels like a reminder of every decision that brought you here. When I told Kiana, "You've got 1 hour," she didn't move. She just stood there with her mouth slightly open like I'd spoken to her in another language. "You're not serious," she said, her tone almost amused. I didn't blink. "You're actually serious?" She laughed, that fake little laugh she uses when she thinks she's still in control. Then her face changed, quick, sharp. "You think you can just throw me out? You think people are gonna be on your side when they hear you kicked your pregnant daughter into the street?" I didn't answer. I walked past her toward the pantry, pulled out a trash bag, and tossed it on the floor in front of her. "Start with your clothes," I said. My voice still didn't raise. I kept it flat, steady. That scared her more than shouting would have. She turned to her friend. "You believe this? My own mother's lost her damn mind." Her friend shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between us. She wasn't ready to be part of this. I looked at her and said, "Baby, you don't need to be here for this. Go on home." The friend didn't argue. She grabbed her purse and practically bolted for the door. Kiana scoffed. "Wow, scaring off my friends now too?" I didn't answer. My silence was a wall she kept throwing rocks at, and each one just bounced back. The first thing she did was go to her room and slam the door so hard the frame rattled. A minute later, I heard drawers yanking open, hangers clattering to the floor. It was strange standing in the hallway listening to the sound of someone packing to leave, someone you brought into this world, whose every need you had once anticipated before she could even speak it. Every zipper I heard, every cabinet slam, it was like a drum beat in my chest, and while she was in there, my mind kept dragging me backward. To nights when I would come home from the late shift, my feet so swollen I thought the skin might split, and still find the energy to make her grilled cheese sandwiches because she liked them before bed. To mornings when I'd braid her hair for school, my own hair uncombed, my own stomach empty because we didn't have enough for both of us to eat before lunch. To the time she was in 8th grade and wanted a pair of white and gold sneakers that cost more than my entire grocery budget for the week. I found a way. I still don't know how, but I did. And she wore them once. Then tossed them in her closet when they weren't the it style anymore. I told myself it was worth it if she felt loved. But standing there, I realized I'd been teaching her something else entirely. That love meant never hearing the word no. She came back into the kitchen with a pile of clothes in her arms, dumped them by the door. "I'm not going far, Ma," she said defiantly. "Just going to stay with people who actually care about me." I raised an eyebrow. "People who care about you don't plot to take what you've built while you're still breathing?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go with the speeches." She started scooping makeup, chargers, little glass jars of body butter off the counter and tossing them into the bag. The sound of glass and plastic clanking together was like the sound of a chapter closing. Ugly, careless. Half an hour passed. She was moving slower now, dragging it out, maybe hoping I'd changed my mind. I didn't. She tried a different approach. "Ma, come on, we can talk about this. You don't have to do this tonight." "It's exactly because it's tonight that I have to," I told her. "If I wait until morning, you'll think I didn't mean it." Her face hardened. "You know you're going to regret this, right?" I tilted my head. Baby, I've been regretting things for years. This won't be one of them. When the hour was up, she was still trying to stall. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had changed. Kiana, let's go, I said, standing by the door. She didn't look up. You're really doing this? Yes. She finally stood, grabbed her bag, and slung it over her shoulder. Fine, but when people ask why I don't speak to you anymore, I'll tell them you threw your pregnant daughter out for no reason. I looked her straight in the eye. Make sure you tell them the whole story, baby. That's the only way it'll make sense. She opened the door and stepped out without another word. The air outside was thick with that late summer Georgia heat that sticks to your skin. I closed the door behind her, turned the lock, and just stood there with my hand on the wood. It wasn't triumph, it wasn't relief, it was grief, pure and heavy. Because no matter how justified you feel, telling your child to leave is like pulling a piece of yourself out and tossing it away. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea going cold in my hands, listening to the house breathe without her in it. And even then, even after everything, I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting a message saying she'd made it somewhere safe. It never came. Silence can be louder than any fight. For 6 months, I didn't hear a single word from Kiana. Not a text, not a call, not a knock on the door in the middle of the night. At first, the quiet felt like a punishment. Like I was being exiled from my own motherhood. Every morning I'd check my phone before I even got out of bed, half hoping for a message that started with "Ma" and ended with something I could hold on to. But the screen stayed dark. The neighborhood, though, oh, they didn't stay quiet. In our part of Atlanta, news travels faster than the mail, and my front porch, it seemed, had turned into the neighborhood's favorite stage. The first week after Kiana left, I couldn't step outside without hearing whispers. Did you hear? Loretta threw her pregnant daughter out. Lord, what kind of mother does that? She must have lost her mind. I'd feel their eyes on me as I walked to the mailbox. A few of them didn't even bother to pretend. Miss Green from 2 houses down leaned on her railing one morning and said, God's watching, Loretta. I just nodded and kept walking. By the 2nd month, the tone started to shift. People who'd kept their distance began stopping me in the grocery store, leaning in close like we were co-conspirators. You did what you had to do, honey, one woman told me by the canned goods. These kids, they'll take and take until you've got nothing left. Another said, my niece tried to get my sister's house the same way. Sometimes you gotta let them hit bottom before they climb back up. I never defended myself to the ones who judged me, and I never gloated with the ones who agreed. Because truth is, neither side had to live with the ache that sat in my chest every night when I turned out the lights in a bedroom that used to be hers. I'd find little traces of her everywhere. A hair tie on the bathroom sink, one of her hoodies balled up in the back of the laundry room, lip gloss rolling around in the bottom of my purse because she'd tossed it there months ago. And the thing about those little traces, they don't fade fast. They just sit there, daring you to feel something every time you see them. I didn't throw any of it away. Not because I couldn't, but because some foolish part of me believed she'd come back for them, and I wanted to be able to say, look, I kept this for you. Around month 4, I started hearing little snatches of information, not from her, but from people who'd just happened to run into her. She's staying with a friend over on Glenwood, someone told me. She was at the bus stop with a big duffel bag. Looked tired, said another. She's showing now, about ready to pop. Each time I'd bite my tongue until I could taste blood, because the urge to jump in my car, find her, and fix everything was almost overwhelming. Almost. By month 6, I'd started to accept that maybe I wouldn't see her again until the baby was already walking, that maybe we'd both be too stubborn to take the first step back toward each other. I told myself I was fine with that. I told myself I'd made peace with it. And then, on a humid Thursday evening in July, I opened my front door and there she was. She looked smaller somehow. Not in size. She had that new mother softness to her, but in presence. Her shoulders weren't thrown back the way they used to be when she wanted the world to think she was untouchable. In front of her, a stroller. Inside, a tiny girl with a head full of dark curls, fast asleep. "Hi, Ma," Kiana said. Her voice wasn't sharp this time. It was quiet. I just stood there for a moment, staring. "Hi," I finally said. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and she rolled the stroller into the living room. The baby made a soft little noise, one hand twitching in her sleep. "What's her name?" I asked. Kiana glanced at me, then back at the baby. "Lauren," she said, "after you." My throat tightened so fast I had to turn away under the pretense of closing the door. We sat at the kitchen table like we'd done 1,000 times before, only now there was this fragile new life between us. "Where have you been?" I asked. My tone wasn't accusing. It was searching. "Around," she said. Then, after a pause, "At first with that friend, then in some temporary housing, then wherever I could. It doesn't matter." "It matters to me," she sighed. "I just didn't want to show up until I could, I don't know, not be a burden." The irony of that statement almost made me laugh, but I didn't. "Where's her father?" I asked. Her mouth twisted. "Gone. Said she's not his. Didn't even try to see her." I felt a flare of anger, not just at him, but at the whole mess. "Did you take him to court?" "I couldn't prove anything. He's got lawyers. I had nothing." The baby stirred again, letting out a little cry. Kiana reached for her, but her movements were clumsy, unsure, like she was afraid of breaking her own child. "She's hungry," Kiana murmured. "Then feed her," I said gently. "I don't have milk. I had to stop. She's been on formula." I got up without a word, walked to the pantry and pulled out a can of formula I'd bought months ago. I set it on the counter. Kiana looked at it, then at me. "You bought this?" I nodded. "You knew I'd come back?" "I hoped." As I showed her how to measure the formula, how to tilt the bottle just right so the baby wouldn't swallow air, I realized my hands were steady for the first time in months. When the baby finished, Kiana looked down at her daughter and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ma, for everything." I didn't rush to say it's okay. It wasn't. But I said, "I know. And you're still my daughter." She cried then, quiet, shaking sobs that made her shoulders tremble, and for the first time in a long while I pulled her close without wondering if I was making a mistake. We sat there for a long while after the baby drifted back to sleep, neither of us speaking. The house felt different with her here, not the baby, Kiana. Her presence was heavy, but not in the same way as before she left. Back then, it had been a storm pressing against the walls, threatening to blow the whole place down. Now, it was more like the quiet after a storm, debris still scattered everywhere, but the air strangely still. She glanced up at me, eyes red from crying. "I need a place to stay just until I can get myself together." My fingers tapped against the table. "If you stay here, there are rules." I saw her stiffen, just a little, like she was bracing for a lecture. "What kind of rules?" "The kind that keep both of us from going through what we did before," I said. If you live here, you work, you contribute. You take care of your baby, not me, not the neighbors, you. And you don't speak to me like you did before, ever. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, but I lifted my hand. You wanted a roof. That's the price. You don't like it, you can walk back out that door. She looked down at her hands, tracing her nails along the edge of the table. I'll work, she said finally. Anywhere. I'll do it. And school, I added. Her head jerked up. School? You start some kind of program. I don't care if it's part-time or online, but you're going to get a skill you can use. You're not going to bounce from job to job until you burn out and end up stuck. The old Kiana would have rolled her eyes, told me I was trying to run her life, but she just nodded, slow and careful. Okay. The first few days were awkward. In the mornings, the baby's cries would wake me before dawn, and I'd lie there listening to Kiana fumble with bottles, shushing softly. Sometimes she'd get it right. Sometimes the baby would wail for another 20 minutes before quieting down. My hands would itch to step in, but I made myself stay in bed. She needed to learn, and I needed to let her. One morning, she knocked on my door, hair a mess, eyes half closed. She won't stop crying, she whispered. I pulled on my robe and followed her to the living room. Lorraine was in her bassinet, little fists waving, cheeks red. I lifted her gently, feeling the tiny weight settle against my chest. She's not hungry, I said after a moment. She's tired, but she's overstimulated. Try holding her like this. I guided Kiana's hands into position, showing her how to rock slowly without jostling. Loren's cries softened, then faded. Kiana exhaled in relief. Why didn't you just take her? Because one day I won't be here to take her, I said quietly. Getting Kiana working was easier than I thought. A friend of mine managed a local grocery store and needed someone to help with stocking. It wasn't glamorous, and the hours weren't perfect, but it was a start. The first week she came home sore and cranky, muttering about rude customers and heavy boxes, but she didn't quit. That alone was something. School took more convincing. We sat at the table one night, the baby asleep in her bassinet between us, my laptop open to a list of community college programs. I can't do nursing, she said immediately. Too much blood. Then pick something else. Medical billing, childcare, dental assistant, they've got options. She scrolled half-heartedly, but when she stopped on early childhood education, I saw her eyes linger. You like kids? I asked. I don't hate them, she said, which in Kiana speak was practically a confession of love. Living together again was like learning to breathe in sync after months of holding our breath. There were good moments. Afternoons where she'd cook dinner while I played with Lauren. Little jokes that slipped out before either of us realized we were laughing again. But there were also moments where the air between us went cold. Like the time she complained about my old furniture in front of her friend from work. I didn't say anything at the moment, but that night I told her, if you disrespect my home again, you'll find out just how fast a door can close. Or the morning she overslept and I had to watch Lauren so she wouldn't be late for her shift. She came back that evening and said, "Thanks, Ma," but in a tone that told me she still expected me to pick up the slack. I reminded her, this isn't a backup plan. You're the mom now. Slowly, we settled into something that felt almost safe. I'd find her at the kitchen counter after midnight, laptop open, studying. I'd peek into Lauren's room and see her curled up in the crib, one tiny hand clutching the blanket while her mother's hand rested gently on her back. One Saturday, I watched Kiana kneel in the yard with Lauren in her lap, showing her the petals of the hibiscus plant like they were treasures. Lauren giggled and tried to grab one, and Kiana laughed, the sound carrying across the yard like it hadn't in years. It didn't erase the past, but it started to soften it. About 3 months after she moved back in, Kiana came into the kitchen one evening holding a paper. "I got an A on my midterm," she said, a little smile tugging at her mouth. I took the paper and read it, pride blooming in my chest. "You earned that," I told her. She hesitated, then added, "I wouldn't have done any of this if you hadn't made me." I set the paper down and met her eyes. "You would have. You just needed a push." But the thing about rebuilding trust is it's fragile. You can go months without a crack, and then one careless word can make the whole structure tremble. That moment came late one night when she thought I was asleep. I overheard her on the phone laughing, telling someone, "Yeah, my mom's finally easing up. She's not so bad when she's not trying to run my life." It was small, stupid, but it reminded me that while we'd made progress, we weren't out of the woods yet. I didn't see it coming. It was a Thursday afternoon in late October, the kind of day where the air feels thin and cold even though the sun is still out. I just finished my shift at the credit union, my mind already on the pot of gumbo I'd promised to start for dinner. I had a list in my head: chop the okra, wash the shrimp, keep the roof from burning, ordinary things, safe things. Then my phone buzzed. It was an email from my supervisor, subject line in all caps: urgent, client account discrepancy. I opened it right there in the parking lot, the engine still running. The words swam a little because the first thing I saw was a number, a negative number, $38,000 missing, gone from one of our longtime client accounts. The kind of mistake that doesn't just make you look bad, the kind that can end careers. I froze in my seat. I knew that account. I'd worked it for years. There was no way I'd misplace that kind of money. My pulse was in my ears, loud enough that I didn't even notice the text from Kiana at first. "We need to talk. Urgent." I stared at those words, like they might rearrange themselves if I just blinked enough. For a split second, I thought maybe she'd gotten into trouble at school. But Kiana had been good lately, showing up to her shifts at the diner, doing her homework at the kitchen table instead of disappearing into her room. Then my supervisor called. His voice was calm, too calm. "Loretta, we've had a complaint from the client. They're saying they spoke to someone who claimed to be you and authorized a transfer to a third-party account. Did you?" "No, absolutely not." My own voice was sharp enough to cut through the stale air in my car. He paused. "We'll need you to come in first thing tomorrow. And, Loretta, we'll need to see your home internet logs. If there's been fraud, we have to trace it." I drove home in a fog, every stoplight like an insult. My mind kept looping back to one thing: who would even try something like this? When I walked through the door, Kiana was on the couch, hunched over her phone. She looked up just long enough to gauge my mood, then put the phone face down. "We need to talk," she said, echoing her text. I dropped my purse on the chair. "So talk." She hesitated, chewing the inside of her cheek. "My friend needed help. She said she was going to get kicked out if she couldn't pay her rent. I let her borrow my phone to make a call while you were at work." I stared at her. "Kiana, what kind of call?" Her gaze slid away. "She just said it was to sort some money stuff. I didn't think it was a big deal." The room felt smaller all of a sudden. "What's her name?" "I can't." "Her name Kiana." My voice was low, steady, the way it gets when I'm holding back a storm. She whispered it, and my stomach dropped. It was a name I recognized from a police report years ago. A girl, picked up for running an online scam ring. I went cold. "Do you understand what you may have just done? This isn't about rent. This is about $38,000 gone from my client's account. And because it happened on our Wi-Fi, it's gonna look like I did it. Her face crumpled, but I didn't move to comfort her. Not yet. I needed the truth first. Loretta, I swear I didn't know, she started, but I cut her off. You're either lying to me or you're the most reckless person I've ever let under my roof. Silence. She finally muttered, I just wanted to help her. She's all I got from before I came here. That sentence landed heavy. It wasn't just about the girl. It was about loyalty, about the kind of ties you keep even when they drag you down. I told her to go to her room. I needed space to think. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after the gumbo had gone cold, staring at the wall clock, listening to the tick-tick-tick. I thought about how easy it would be to tell my supervisor the truth, that it was Kiana's friend. But what then? Kiana could be charged as an accomplice. She'd lose her job. She'd lose everything she'd been slowly, painfully building here. And then there was the other truth. If I didn't clear my name, I could lose my job, my pension, the roof over both our heads. Every road led to some kind of ruin. Around midnight, I heard her door creak open. Barefoot, she padded into the kitchen, eyes red. She stood there for a long time before speaking. I'll tell them it was me, she said finally. I'll tell them I used the internet. You shouldn't have to pay for my mistake. Her voice shook, but her chin was up. I just looked at her. For the first time since she'd moved in, I saw something in her face that wasn't just defiance or fear. It was ownership, a readiness to face the mess head on. And I realized something terrifying. If she did that, they wouldn't just take her job. They'd take her future. And in this city, for a young black girl with a record, the doors don't just close. They slam and lock from the inside. I told her to go back to bed. We'll handle it, I said, together, but not like that. The next morning, I walked into my supervisor's office with a plan. Not a perfect one, but one that might keep both of us standing when this was over. The morning air was bitter, the kind that makes your teeth ache if you breathe in too fast. I didn't bother with breakfast. My stomach was too tight for food. Kiana was at the table, pushing dry cereal around in a bowl she wasn't eating from either. She looked like she hadn't slept, same as me. You sure you want me to stay home? She asked. Yes. My tone left no room for argument. This isn't your meeting. But the truth? Part of me wanted her there, not to speak, not to defend herself, just to sit behind me so I could feel her presence, so I wouldn't have to carry this alone. Still, I knew it was better if she wasn't in that room. If things went bad, I'd rather she wasn't anywhere near the fallout. The bank lobby was too bright, too clean, like it had been polished just to remind me how much I could lose. My supervisor, Mr. Hammond, was waiting by the glass conference room. He didn't shake my hand. That told me everything about the mood. Inside sat two other people, a stern-faced compliance officer named Mrs. Riggs, and the client whose account had been drained. I'd known her for years, Mrs. Patterson, a widow in her 70s who still wore her wedding ring like her husband was coming back any day. She looked at me like she was searching for cracks in my face, some sign of guilt. It burned. We'll make this simple, Hammond said. The transaction came from your IP address. The authorization matched your security questions. We need to know exactly what happened. I told him everything. Almost everything. I said that someone must have gained access to my home network without my knowledge, that I'd already reset my passwords, that I'd cooperate fully with the investigation. Mrs. Riggs tapped her pen on the table. Do you share your Wi-Fi password with anyone outside the household? I hesitated. No. Technically, it was true. I hadn't given it to Kiana's friend. But the lie lived in the space between the words, and I could feel Mrs. Riggs smell it. Mrs. Patterson's voice cracked when she spoke. Loretta, I trusted you. I don't understand how this could happen. I met her eyes. I'm going to make it right. The meeting ended with a list of next steps. Subpoenas, logs, tracing the transfer. But Hammond pulled me aside as the others left. Loretta, between you and me, if this doesn't clear fast, the board's going to ask for your resignation. I nodded, because what else could I do? When I got home, Kiana was sitting on the couch with her knees pulled up to her chest. Well, she asked. I told her the truth. It wasn't over. She stood, pacing. We could just go to her, your client. Explain it. Maybe she'd believe no. My voice was sharper than I intended. If you stand in front of her looking like you do, saying you didn't mean for it to happen, they'll still see what they want to see. Her eyes flashed. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer because we both knew. We both knew how quickly people decided what a young black girl in trouble was capable of, and how hard it was to scrub that judgment off once it stuck. That night, I started making calls. Not to the police, not yet. To people I knew from my church, from the community board, from way back when my brother ran a small IT shop out of his garage. I asked questions in careful ways, looking for anyone who'd heard of a girl named Shanice Moore, the so-called friend Kiana had tried to help. By Sunday, I had a lead. Shanice had been seen at a cheap motel on the south side, the kind with flickering neon and a lobby that smelled like old coffee and bleach. I didn't tell Kiana where I was going. I found her leaning against the soda machine, scrolling on her phone. She looked younger than I remembered from the mugshot, but her smile was pure predator when she saw me. Well, if it isn't Mama Loretta, she said like we were old friends. I didn't waste time. You used my internet. You stole from a woman who barely has enough to bury herself when the time comes. You're gonna fix it. She laughed. You think I got 38 grand sitting around? Please. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Then you're gonna tell me who does. And you're going to do it before I make a call that brings the police through that door in under 5 minutes. Her smirk faltered. It took an hour of back and forth, but I got a name. And more importantly, I got the account number where the money had been moved next. Monday morning, I walked back into Hammond's office and slid the paper across his desk. There's your trail, I said. They didn't thank me. They didn't apologize. But by Wednesday, the money was back in Mrs. Patterson's account. Officially, the bank called it a recovered fraudulent transaction. Unofficially, Hammond told me I was lucky and that I should be more careful who I let in my life. When I got home, Kiana was waiting at the door. She hugged me without a word. For a moment, I just stood there, my arms stiff at my sides. Then I let them wrap around her. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The quiet in the house after the bank ordeal wasn't the same kind of quiet we'd had before. Before it was brittle, the kind that could shatter with one wrong word. Now it was heavy, like the silence after a storm when you can't decide whether to be relieved or scared of the damage you haven't found yet. Kiana was different. She moved around the apartment softer, like she didn't want to draw attention. She washed her own dishes, kept her music low, even folded the laundry I'd left in the dryer. It wasn't just good behavior. It was the kind of caution you see in someone who's waiting for a verdict. One night, I found her at the kitchen table with a spiral notebook open in front of her. She was writing in tiny, cramped letters, chewing the cap of her pen. "What's that?" I asked. She closed it halfway like a reflex. "Just stuff." I poured myself some tea and sat across from her. "Let me see." Her jaw tightened. For a second, I thought she'd refuse, but she slid the notebook toward me without looking up. It wasn't schoolwork. It was a list, names, dates, places, and beside some of them, little notes. Owes me. Lied. Never again. What is this, Kiana? She stared at the wall. It's people I'm done with, people I can't go back to, no matter how bad things get. I kept flipping. My name wasn't there. That shouldn't have mattered, but it did. You're planning to make a clean break? I asked. Her laugh was small and bitter. Planning? You make it sound like I've got choices lined up. I'm just trying to keep from sliding back. We didn't talk for a while after that. The tea cooled. She took the notebook back and went to her room. Days passed. The weather turned warm enough to crack the windows, and the smell of rain-soaked pavement drifted in. I caught her humming once while she cleaned the bathroom, and for a moment it felt like maybe, just maybe, we could both breathe again. Then came the phone call. I was at my desk paying bills when my cell lit up with an unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. Ms. Watson? The voice was male, smooth in the way that makes you think of oil. You don't know me, but I think you know someone who owes me money. A girl named Kiana. My hand tightened on the phone. Who is this? He chuckled. Doesn't matter. What matters is she took something from me and I'd like it back. Tonight. I could hear traffic in the background. Big city traffic, not our neighborhood. You've got the wrong number, I said and hung up. I didn't tell Kiana, not right away. I needed to think. That night, I watched her over dinner. She was eating slow, pushing rice around her plate, not meeting my eyes. Finally, I asked, You want to tell me about the man who called me? Her fork froze midair. She set it down like it weighed a pound. I thought he lost my number, she said quietly. Guess not. Who is he? Someone I used to run with before all this. She waved a hand between us. Before you. And what does he mean you took something? She bit her lip hard enough to leave a mark. It wasn't money, it was a phone, his phone. I thought it was just some burner, but... She trailed off. But what? She met my eyes for the first time. It had stuff on it. Stuff about people, deals, things I didn't want to be part of anymore. I wiped it, sold it. I pushed my plate away. Kiana, you understand this isn't like a fight in school. This isn't even like what happened with the bank. These are people who don't forgive and don't forget. She nodded once, but her eyes were glassy. I know. We sat in the dim kitchen, neither of us moving. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Finally, I said, You can't stay here tonight. Her head jerked up. What? You're kicking me out? No, I'm keeping you alive. I didn't give her time to argue. I grabbed my keys, a hoodie, and the envelope of cash I kept taped under the drawer for emergencies. We drove without speaking, the city lights flashing over her face in strips of orange and white. I took her to a women's shelter on the far side of town, not perfect, but safer than my address if someone came looking. When she got out of the car, she leaned back in through the open door. You really think I'm worth all this trouble? I looked at her, this stubborn, complicated girl who'd turned my life inside out. I think you're worth more than the mess you've been through. She didn't answer, just nodded, hugged me quick, and walked inside. On the way home, I kept thinking about her notebook, the list of people she'd sworn off. I wondered if she'd add my name someday, and whether I'd deserve it if she did. It had been 3 nights since I'd left Kiana at the shelter. The first night, I barely slept. Every sound outside, a car backfiring, a drunk shouting down the street, even the wind rattling the blinds, sent me to the window. I kept expecting headlights to sweep across the walls, expecting someone to knock hard enough to shake the door. The second night, I told myself I'd call her, check if she was okay, but I didn't. Because if she wasn't, if she'd run, if she'd gone back to that man, I didn't know what I'd do with that knowledge. By the third night, I couldn't stand it anymore. The shelter's receptionist recognized me right away. "She's in the lounge," she said, lowering her voice. "Been keeping to herself. Quiet girl." I walked down a narrow hallway lined with donated coats and mismatched shoes. The smell of strong coffee and laundry soap filled the air. Kiana was at a corner table, hoodie up, earbuds in, a paperback splayed in front of her. She saw me and didn't smile, just pulled one earbud out, like she wasn't sure yet which version of me she was going to get. "I came to see how you're doing," I said. "I'm here, ain't I?" "That's not the same as doing okay." She shut the book and leaned back in her chair. "I've been thinking about that night. How you just dropped everything to get me out. I don't know anybody else who would have done that." "You're not supposed to know people who would," I said. She smirked a little, but it faded fast. "They called me. Not him. One of his people said I could make things right if I met them, just once. Tonight." The air between us went still. "And you're thinking about it." "I don't want to. But I also don't want to be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life." I sat down across from her. "You go to them. You don't get your life back. You give it away. You understand?" Her voice was quiet. "So what's the alternative? Hide here forever?" "No. We make it so they can't touch you." It wasn't bravado. It was something colder, heavier, the part of me that had survived my own years of bad choices. We left the shelter together, not talking much. I didn't take her to my apartment. I took her to a small office on the edge of downtown where a man named Earl Simmons sat behind a desk cluttered with legal pads and styrofoam coffee cups. Earl had been around long enough to know how to make problems disappear, the kind that don't get solved in courtrooms. He listened to Kiana, didn't interrupt, just wrote things down in a slow, looping hand. When she was done, he asked one question. "You willing to swear to all this?" Kiana's gaze flicked to me. I gave a small nod. "Yes," she said. By the time we left, she had a restraining order in motion, a contact at the local precinct, and a number she could call day or night. It wasn't a magic shield, but it was something. That night, back in my kitchen, Kiana opened her notebook, the one with the list. She tore out the first 3 pages, crumpled them, and dropped them in the trash. "You sure you want to do that?" I asked. "I don't need to keep track anymore," she said. "I just need to keep moving forward." We ate in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Not the silence of fear, not even the silence of things unsaid. It was the kind that comes when you've both decided without saying it that you're not going back. I don't know what'll happen next week or next month. I don't know if she'll stay or if life will pull her somewhere I can't follow. But I do know this. The girl who walked into my life with nothing but a duffel bag and too many secrets is not the same one sitting across from me now. And maybe, just maybe, neither am I.